these are part of 5 sessions, masterclass sessions, which we have organized as part of the Clarion Call.
Yeah.
So Clarion Call, all of you must be aware that it is one of the largest startup contests, and it's being organized by IIM Calcutta, Mumbai Association, and together with IMCIP, which is IMC Incubator. So uh, a lot of startups already participated, and we have come down to last 20 finalists, which will be which has been, I think, introduced today only. And apart from this, the 5 masterclass session, we have 2 sessions lined up today. The one which we are on, it will be on data security by Shivangi, and then at 5 p.m. For Freshworks journey. And tomorrow we have sessions taken by Ruchita, who is from Google, and Ruchita, Subrat, and Santosh. So this one. Yeah, and all of the participants can go on the website and they can register there for each of the 5 sessions, and they can join on the link. Okay, so hi Shivangi, just to give a brief introduction of Shivangi. Sorry to keep you waiting. Yeah, just. Yeah. So Shivangi has been running Arka, which is the data security firm for last 11 years now. She is the co-founder and CEO at the firm, and she is an industry veteran on data privacy and information security. Just to introduce in few of the words, she is also an IIM alumnus from IIM Calcutta alumnus, and she has been at the forefront of the emerging risk and business need, and she brings with her decades of expertise in the similar field. She has also been part of Asia Advisory Board, IAPP, which is world's largest body on privacy, and it's pleasure to host her today for this session. So yeah, Shivangi, so you can start the session.
Thank you so much. Let me just share my screen. Yeah, can you see my screen?
Yeah, it's visible.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Yeah, just before we start, so at any point of time, if someone has a question or they want to get more clarity, they can raise their hand or they can put in the chat also, and then we can take it up from there. So at any point of time, if someone has a question, they can raise their hands.
Yeah, I could actually, since I'm on full screen mode, I may not be able to see the raised hands or the chat. So just if you could just prompt.
No, I will put it up to you if there's
okay.
If there's any clarity required, I will just raise it. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, and that was a generous introduction. Since there are many IMCs here, I'm from the 30th batch, 93-95. And I'm looking forward to doing this session. I'm going to try and finish the session in less than an hour, so that we have about half an hour at least for Q&As. And I'm always available to answer questions even later. So the first thing that I'm going to sort of clarify is, like Vatsal said, I run a data security firm, but I run actually a data privacy firm and information security. And let's understand what are the differences also between the two. Okay. A little bit about Arka before I begin. I've spent many years in the corporate world with Sifi, with Wipro, before the foolishness of entrepreneurship took over. And the first two, since all of you are entrepreneurs, I must say this: the first 2 ventures I started failed spectacularly, and after about 4 years, I founded this current venture, which is we're still learning. I still feel like I started just yesterday, and we have a long way to go. Okay, so we founded this. My co-founder is Sameer Anja, and we founded this company in 2012. We are headquartered out of Pune, but we have a team that is spread out of Mumbai, Bangalore, Bahrain. I personally, I'm based out of Mumbai, but temporarily COVID times in Pune. We focus on 2 areas as such.
verticals, data privacy and InfoSec, and we'll talk a little bit about what the difference is between the two. And we also have a very focused, different focus on the large enterprises and the small and mid-sized businesses as well in our offerings. Okay, and these are some of the customers that we have worked with and continue to work with. We've had the privilege of being some very really early entrants in the India data privacy space, and have had an opportunity to therefore play a big role in some of the key developments in this area over the years. In fact, for the longest, our only client used to be DSCI, which is the Data Security Council of India, which is a NASSCOM body that essentially looks at security and privacy. And we've done a number of things with them, including I've authored a textbook for them. It's India's first textbook on data privacy, and helped them develop 2 certification programs. I continue to be a faculty on one and run the other as part of ARCA. We've done, we bring out this annual study from our end, which is like what is called State of Data Privacy of Indian Mobile Apps and Websites. The thing is, there are very few data points about data privacy in India, so we kind of started this on a lark, and we find that this has great takeaways for various stakeholders, and so we continue doing this. We release this every year in December of that year. Okay, had a few awards and recognitions to our name. We've been in the Deloitte Tech Fast 50 for the last 2 years in a row, and also, as I mentioned, serve on the Asia Advisory Board. I've also on the newly constituted IAPP's India board, which is looking at this market, and had some good times in this field. Okay, how are we different? We actually don't run the organization in the traditional consulting mode. We actually went out and built a platform which automates. It's a SaaS platform that essentially helps organizations assess, implement, and manage their privacy and security programs. So a lot of the intelligence is built into the platform, and that's the difference. We don't really have an army of people. There are no armies of people available in this sector for us to hire, so which pushed us into looking at automating. We run a lab, India's first and only privacy testing lab, which is what produces that report, and we do a host of other things at the lab as well. And we run a dedicated specialist data privacy academy, where we train, we run some accredited training programs which are accredited to DSCI and IAPP, as well as do a lot of in-house customized programs as well, senior management briefings, board briefings, end user awareness and stuff like that. Okay, having said that, let's deep dive straight into privacy. Let's understand the context first. Okay, so wherever we are going digital, like it's there's no tomorrow, and there is data therefore all over the place. I don't have to talk about this to y'all, but remember that wherever there is data, there are risks as well, right? And these risks arise from, on one hand, one risk is about data getting into wrong hands or into the hands of bad actors, often referred to as hackers or attackers, right? Which is actually compromising the confidentiality of that data. Second is the fear of data getting tampered with, either deliberately or by mistake, right? Because oftentimes people do it by mistake within organizations. That's called the risk of integrity of the data getting compromised. Then you have the risk of data not being available when it's required, the availability factor, which is what happened, last year, when overnight we all had to start working from home, and suddenly people didn't have access to their data and IT infrastructure to continue working, right? Now, these 3 are actually popularly known as the CIA pillars, and they are addressed by the information security or the cyber security program of an organization, which solve for the problem statements generated by these 3 pillars. Okay. However, there's an other kind of risk, which is the risk of inappropriate or wrong usage of data, specifically personal data, by legitimate actors, people who have, who are supposed to have access to that data, who legitimately, control that data, who use it for, purposes which it is not meant to be used for. Now, this is a problem that InfoSec doesn't solve for. Okay, for that and for many more things, you need a privacy program. Okay, so therefore, there are two different pillars. They solve for two different problem statements. Of course, the two interact and they're closely linked, but they're two different issues altogether. Okay, let's look at an other view of risks, right? So you have risks which I like to call from above the line activities, okay, which is, vis-a-vis, let's say, risk from below the line activities, which are criminal activities, which is typically what is associated with cybercrime and attackers and frauds and all of that that's happening. So I'm not talking about those risks. That's not a risk that we're going to talk about today. But we are going to talk about risks that arise from legitimate, above the line activities that, all of us as businesses indulge in, and how do those risks get addressed. Okay? So let's look at the risk from above the line activities. So let's take a step back and say, how do we as individuals interact online? So typically we, interact online with a digital property, right? It could be an app, it could be a website, it could be a smart device, whatever. Now that digital property essentially collects, uses, and further discloses your personal data, PD's personal data. Now when we interact with that digital property, we give it two things. We give it our attention, of course, and we give it a whole host of our data. Some of it knowingly, a lot of it unknowingly, below the surface. Now, what does that digital property do with that data? It further discloses it into the huge advertising ecosystem. I'm sure a lot of you have been either parts of this ecosystem or know the ecosystem well. For those who don't, it is a huge advertising ecosystem out there of legitimate players, right? I'm calling it an ecosystem. That ecosystem in turn gives back to the digital property a payment, okay, and two advertisements which need to be delivered finally to the user, that is you and I, right? What do we get? We actually primarily get a service, right? Whereas in reality, the ad ecosystem is also pumping ads to us. So when we say a service, what do we get? We get, paid services, which is fine, which we pay for. And then we get a host of free services, right? So for example, our mail, search, social media, free apps of all types, they're all free. So when something is free, we are the product, right? So what are we? We are essentially the product. Somebody else is making, is where the money is flowing from. And what we get is what we think is free, just that the currency for payment is not cash. The currency for payment is our personal data. Okay. Essentially, we create digital footprints via all that we do, right? Whether what we browse, what we eat, where we go, who we like, who we chat with, what we watch online, what we read, even what we own, the music we listen to, what we drive. A lot of our vehicles today are smart vehicles. What we shop, so on, right? And all of that data is collected, organized by algorithms, analyzed, and a unique digital footprint is created, which is a live footprint in the sense it's constantly being enriched, right? So what? What's the big deal? I mean, this is something which we are all used to, we know very well, right? So what happens to your digital footprint? It is, as I said, continuously added to and enriched with time and usage. And this footprint is generated by multiple entities. So it's not as though we have a single footprint. We have multiple footprints, each of which is, lying with different entities, who in turn feed that into the vast ecosystems. Vast troves of offline data is combined with it. And this is again fed back to the various entities interacting with you, who in turn use this to, the good part is they use it to give you content which is based on your profile, things you may like, kind of stuff that we've gotten so used to, right? And all of that. And it's one continuous cycle, right? So again, the question is, so what? Okay, what happens is, over a period of time, we start operating in what are known as echo chambers. Okay, where we keep seeing only our type of content, right? News that is tailored to our likes and preferences, opinion pieces that echo our opinions, music, videos, books, TV shows, all of which that reinforces our ideas and beliefs. Okay, contrast this with, let's say, even today many of us read newspapers of the physical kind, but contrast it to those days when you picked up a newspaper, you got all sorts of news. It wasn't tailored to you, it was news that the editor put out, and we saw whether we liked it, we didn't like it, whether it resonated with us, didn't resonate with us, we got to see all news, right? Whereas now we run the danger of not seeing that. In fact, I have people who work in this field who deliberately, for example, go and visit sites or search for terms which are absolutely the opposite of what they believe in, so that they start seeing a little balanced kind of content feeds into their channels. Okay. So what happens is, over a period of time, the danger of this is that our shaping of our ideas, views, political and ideological beliefs starts happening, leading to huge rifts in society and greatly influencing our overall behavior, which is a dangerous thing. I'm very happy if I get ads that tell me that there's a great discount in the store I shop at, but if somebody is going to nudge me in my opinions, then I have a problem, right? In fact, two great examples. I don't know how many of you have seen the documentary or read the book by Christopher Wiley, who was the Cambridge Analytica whistleblower. And this we're talking 4 years ago, about how they influenced the 2016 presidential elections and the Brexit vote. Now, this is like 5 years ago, right? So imagine now how much of that sophistication has further escalated, and how much of therefore the kind of world we live in today. So let's take a look at what happens in the background for something like this to happen. Okay. So you all know that we have the mobile ecosystem, right? Our mobile phones, our smartphones are like a second limb to us. So we also know, and many of you are developing some fantastic apps. So basically, an app talks to a website using permissions, right? And most of these are required permissions. Some of them are discretionary permissions, and a small set of those discretionary permissions are what are dangerous permissions. That's not a terminology we've coined, it's an Android terminology. Okay. The other thing is that, then those of you who work with apps will know very well, is that you also have a lot of SDKs embedded in these apps, right? Pieces of code which belong to third parties. Now, what happens is that data gets collected from the user or in the background from the app and the device using permissions. So permissions help you extract that data and to introduce some functionality. That data gets sent to the organization to whom the app belongs. It also gets sent to all the SDKs and the organizations to whom the SDKs belong. And each of them finally pushes it back into that vast tracking, profiling, advertising ecosystems. So you think you're on an app, but in reality, you don't know who all are getting access to your data. And the more the permissions, the more the dangerous permissions, the more data which is of highly sensitive nature that's going out. So by dangerous permissions, I mean stuff like access to camera, microphone, contacts, SMS, etc., etc. Okay. Let's look at the web ecosystem. Same thing, you have every website has a first party, that is the website to which you're visiting, and then a whole host of third parties embedded in it. And remember, the web ecosystem is 15 years minimum, sort of senior to the mobile app ecosystem, therefore much more mature and much more sophisticated. And a host of tracking tools are part of it. And same thing happens, data picked up from user, data picked up from the background goes to all the first party as well as the embedded third parties and into those ecosystems that we are talking about, right? Then you have the social media identity ecosystem. Now, all of us are familiar with sign in via Facebook, Google, etc. And that's something which we are which is very convenient, right? You don't have to think of creating another account. But what happens in the background? The app or the website that you use this gets access to some data from Facebook, Google, and Twitter, depending on what you use. And that's a cycle goes on. And in fact, Google has 3 levels of access, which is known as basic, medium, full. And Google themselves say be very careful about properties asking for full access, because you can essentially do whatever you can do when the app or the website can do exactly what you can do when you log in using your user ID password, right? So I talked about the study we run, and here are some stats from our latest study. The Android, and you can download this from our website, by the way. Okay. So if you look at Android apps, Indian Android apps, so for example, we do not test international or apps. So for example, we do not test the likes of Uber or Facebook or stuff like that. Okay, just to clarify. So these are Indian apps, and they are across. They're not just social media. They include banking, fintech, e-commerce, transport, telecom, what have you. Okay. 71% of apps have access to your exact location. And when we say exact location, you can take access to what is called coarse location, which means it will tell you approximately where the person is within 1 square kilometer radius or 1 square mile radius. But exact location says exactly where you are. Now, if I'm ordering food or I'm ordering a cab to pick me up, I obviously need to give my exact location. But why does a music streaming app require my exact location, right? 50% can read your contacts, 62% have access to your camera, 46% have access to microphone. And because we've been doing this for 4 years, look at the trend analysis, okay? It's just been going up. It's not decreased at all. Some more stats on the websites from 99% of the websites we studied have third-party trackers embedded in it, an average of 22 third-party trackers embedded in a website. And remember, I told you this includes even sectors like banking, etc. Right? 93% websites have known third parties embedded that were involved in advertising and tracking specifically. Okay. How do we compare with the rest of the world? Because we benchmark and we also test out apps from US and Europe just so that we can benchmark. We are double of everybody else. Okay, whether it is reading SMSs, whether it is audio recording, whether it is reading info of other apps from your app, and so on and so forth. So I'm sure this sounds familiar to a lot of you. We have all sort of experienced this in some ways, and we've used the term spooky and so on, right? So let's say a couple is having breakfast at home, and of course I'm talking about the non-COVID times, right? And they decide that they start planning a vacation to, say, Bali during Xmas. Okay? Then at the husband's office a little while later, the husband searches for hotels and flights to Bali using Google on his laptop at work. Okay, the wife doesn't do any such thing. After a while, the wife visits a news website on her iPad. She's not done any search for Bali, and she starts seeing promotional ads for Bali. Okay, and then by afternoon the husband starts receiving SMSs on his mobile making offers for Bali. In the evening, the wife is coming back in her car. She logs into Facebook and she starts seeing ads for resorts in Bali, etc. And the cycle continues. I'm sure each of you have seen some version of this or the other happening almost every day, right? Now you know why it happens. Okay. So if you were to put it all together, we as individuals share our data with organizations, either directly, that is we fill forms, we via mobile apps, web interfaces, social media, etc. Lots of data about us is picked up from third parties. This is stored, processed, analyzed, further shared with third parties. Detailed profiles are built, those profiles are shared, and as we said, vast ecosystems exists, and all of that is finally used to not just sell us ads and not just tell us about the best deal in town, but to more importantly influence, nudge, shape our ideas, opinions and decisions. Okay, which is what the whole issue is about. So, is there something we can do about this as individuals? Nothing much. We can just be careful. But this is something which, if we choose to be in the online world, this is something which we kind of learn to live with and de-risk ourselves to the extent possible. Okay. Hence, governments, regulators, civil society, etc., stepping in so that they can define the rights of individuals over their personal data and enable the protection of these rights. Okay. And as organizations, you can implement best practices and programs to safeguard the rights of your data subjects or data principals, which is essentially the individual. Okay. And that's why the law that is coming up for us. Okay, so since we've understood this, the question is therefore, what is data privacy? We've understood what it is not, and we've understood what things happen in the background, right? So understand that for privacy, at the core is personal data. Okay, so it is sometimes called personal information or personally identifiable information or what have you. But essentially, that's in the core. Why is this important to understand? Because as organizations, we deal with a lot of critical, sensitive information, which is not necessarily personal data, right? So you will have, say, inventory, or you'll have your corporate financial performance of the company, so on and so forth. It's all highly sensitive, but it is not personal data. And what is not personal data is not a part of privacy. Okay. Whereas when you run an InfoSec program, you will cover all sorts of data of the organization and work towards protecting it. So then the question that begs to be answered is, if it's all about personal data, what is personal data, right? So, I mean, intuitively, you and I will easily go out and say that, what has been our understanding till date, and we are right, which is that we say, data, demographic data, identity data, financial data, data about our health, biometrics, political affiliations, criminal history, all of that, right? Now, all of that is what we at Arca like to call about the surface data, which is something which we all understand and know and is visible. However, the definition of personal data has moved on and expanded to cover even a host of data which we call below the surface data, which is device identifiers, online identifiers, cookies, trackers, location data, social media markers, even RFID tags or data that is thrown up as a result of analytics and, deep AI, ML, etc., etc. Okay. Anything that can potentially identify an individual, not just directly identify an individual, is considered a personal data element. PD is personal data element, okay, which means it is under the purview of a privacy program. Why is below the surface data considered personal data? We've just seen all that Raman of how we are tracked and what goes on with apps. So essentially it is, it can be used to uniquely identify you without really knowing your name or address. They'll just know your profile, saying, okay, this person wakes up at this time, visits these sites, this is where she goes, this is the kind of food she eats. And I mean, that talks a lot about you, right? So therefore, what is data privacy? So let's say as an individual, I deal with an organization. Let's say I deal with a bank, right? In the process, I share a lot of personal data, deliberately and involuntarily, right? In return, I enjoy certain rights and privileges, and I'm using the term rights very loosely here. It's not from a legal perspective, okay? Now, some of these are what are termed as data privacy related rights and privileges. So what are they? For example, I want to know what is my personal data being used for, whatever has been taken from me. I want to know, are you collecting more than what is required to provide me with a particular product or service, right? For example, I mean, I like to give this example. Pre-COVID days, I'd just hopped into a Bata store to pick up, slippers to wear at home. So I had done it very, mechanically. I just walked in, I picked up a pair, I was ready to kind of walk out. It was a very low involvement thing for me. And I was paying cash. So I stood in the queue and, sure enough, when my turn came, the billing person asked me, Can I have your phone number and mail ID? I said, why do you want my phone number and mail ID? He said, nahi, system mangta hai. This is typical, right? All of us have seen that. I said, I'm not going to give it to you. So then he looked very blankly at me. I said, listen, I'm paying you cash. You don't even need to track me down. So he was still muttering. Then I said, okay, then I'm not buying this. I'm walking out. So then I think poor guy must have done what most people do, which is he must have put some dummy, name, ID and all of that. But the point is, to buy a pair of rubber chappals, do I really need to give all of this information about me? So what is my information are you collecting more than that you require to provide me a product or service? Are you sharing it with a third party without my knowledge? And this, I mean, today every organization, however small it is, has tons of vendors, right? I mean, I'm not talking about the big guys. The big guys have them in, thousands and tens of thousands. Okay. How can I access my personal data and make corrections as and when required? I mean, we don't know what data is lying with whom and whether it's accurate, inaccurate, how do you correct it? Is my consent being taken for all that you're doing with my personal data? Am I being profiled and tracked? And are you protecting it properly? This last bit is what data security is about. Okay, and the reason I highlight it is because we tend to use the terms data privacy and data security very loosely and interchangeably, whereas data security is just about keeping the data secure, whereas privacy is that plus all of this and some more which we've not really discussed. Okay, so understand that privacy is all about giving an individual control over her data, end of the day. Okay. Typically laws and regulations on privacy. So these are typically in the privacy world are called privacy principles and rights. Okay, they translate into specific privacy principles and rights, and those get embedded in laws and regulations, right? So globally, almost every country in the world has a privacy law. The EU GDPR, I don't know how many of you have heard of it, has been what is called a game changer, because EU has always been at the forefront of privacy in the world. And the law that they passed, which came into effect in 2018, has begun to, as a complete, like it is built grounds up to reflect current reality. And one of the reasons why the world stood up and took notice is because of the sheer size of penalties, 2 to 4% of global turnovers, or 10 to 20,000 euros, 10 to 20 million euros. Okay. And now what is happening is, and it had what is called extraterrestrial jurisdiction, which means that even if your organization is located outside of the EU, if you are targeting residents in the EU, you have to obey the law. And therefore, it changed things, and today almost every law is changing, or new laws that are coming are, picking up the strains from GDPR. What has happened in India? The Supreme Court basically in 2017 gave a ruling that privacy is a fundamental right. It is a very big deal, by the way. We have every right to feel, we should feel proud about it, because it's not a fundamental right in many countries. For example, in the US, privacy is not a fundamental right. Okay. What is the implication of a fundamental right? I mean, if we all go back to our basic lessons of civics, it essentially means that no government can come and legislate away that right from you, right? After that, a committee was set up under Justice Sri Krishna, who came up with a draft bill. Then a slightly updated version of that bill was introduced in Parliament in December of 2019. It was sent to a joint parliamentary committee headed by Meenakshi Lekhi, and she's expected to present her report in the monsoon session of Parliament. And then we've always had the IT Act, which has promulgated some of these rules, just that the fines are so minuscule that nobody has paid attention to it. Okay. Just something I'd like to say here. Okay, and I've been in this field for a long time, and I've been doing so many seminars and conferences. I keep hearing this, although it's a little less now. I keep hearing this argument, saying that, oh, but in India, privacy is no big deal. I mean, we are a country where we don't respect privacy. We are a country where we will tell our entire life history to the stranger sitting next to us on the plane or bus or train. The point is, that is not the point. Culturally, we are not a greatly privacy sensitive nation, that's for sure. For the next 10 generations, we'll keep telling the stranger on the plane our life history. The point is that today we are the second largest digital nation in the world after China, and the only one which is open for the whole wide world to do whatever they feel like with our data. Right? China is shut, Europe is closed, a lot of the US is beginning to figure out its feet. We are such a large chunk of population and we have no control over our data. It's the Wild West, right? And because it's such a large chunk, everybody is watching and waiting to see what our privacy law is about, because it is going to impact so many people and trade, right? So whatever spin people give to it, it is finally about the money. It's finally which is about our data. Okay, so let's not confuse privacy as culture and privacy as something which is about controlling our data. Okay, so any privacy law, and this from your organization's perspective, you should understand that you'll have laws, but finally what boils down for an organization is that there are only three things you need to watch out for. What are the principles which are embedded in the law that you need to adhere to? What are the rights that you have to give to individuals, so that they have more control over their data? Those are embedded in the regulation. And then you will have a whole lot of organizational obligations. You can be a controller, processor, whatever, which will comprise a mix of people, process, and technology measures that you need to implement. Okay. For example, in the India Personal Data Protection Bill, you have these five principles which have been talked about, which is that you have to limit the usage of data to the purpose that you have got the user to sign off on, only collect what you need, do not keep data beyond what you require, provide a choice, give notice, and ensure it remains secure. Then you have some rights, which is that anybody who comes up to you and asks you for this, you're obliged to give, which is, somebody can come and ask to access the data they have, they can ask to erase the data, they can ask to be forgotten, in which case it's interpreted in our laws that you will not share it further, and that you will ensure the data is portable, so that somebody they want to take the data and go away, you should be able to give it in a portable manner. And of course, as organizations, you have to prepare for what is called breach notification. That's a big one, that if there's a breach, you have to notify. Today, except for banking and a few other sectors, if there's a breach, you brush it under the carpet, right? You cannot do that anymore, which means you have to set up systems to notice breaches, right? Then there's stuff like you embed privacy at the design stage, you do impact assessments, you do design privacy by design, you watch for where you're transferring data outside the country, and so on and so forth. Okay, why should privacy laws be taken seriously? I mean, forget it being a smart business move and risk mitigation kind of scenario. Bottom line is, you just take it seriously because of the penalties. Okay, so here's a look at the kind of penalties that the India law is talking about. Same as I said, GDPRization of laws, 4%, 2% of global turnovers, or 15 crores or 5 crore buckets. Okay, so which you have to sort of watch out for. And then of course there are penalties for small minor things as well. Okay, so here's another view, okay, which I want to talk about, which is, where is the world headed? Hopefully all of you are setting up organizations and founding organizations where you're looking at the global market, right? So let's look at where the world is headed and how this whole debate and discussion is of pertinence to the core of your business. Okay, so what are the key forces shaping the world of data privacy and information risks overall? So one is, you have laws and regulations, you have laws around personal data, you have laws that are coming up around what is increasingly known as non-personal data. Examples of non-personal data is, let's say, community data. data, which is, you have smart devices, smart cities, right? So let's say you have a smart street light. This data being collected by sensors there, who does that data belong to? So therefore you have this whole concept of non-personal data. A report has just been published. There was a committee set up in India under Chris Gopalakrishnan of ex-Infosys, and that's a very interesting field as well. And there are rumors that parts of that will also come in our privacy bill. Okay. Then you have new regulations being introduced. Asia alone, 13 countries are expected to bring out privacy laws in the coming 3 years, including India. Okay. Existing laws are being revamped. We are seeing changes everywhere. Singapore, Australia, Canada, all these guys who have had a law for a long time are making changes. Regulators are getting very proactive and stringent. Some of this is news that you and I see quite often. Google has been fined so much and Facebook has been fined so much. That's what comes to the top of the queue, but otherwise there's a lot else, right? And then, as I said, non-personal data, we're seeing green shoots, and this will play out over the coming couple of years. Then there are the global digital ecosystems. Okay, I don't know how many of you are aware that third-party cookies, which are embedded in our browsers, are being phased out. Safari is already phased it out. Mozilla has already phased it out, but Chrome is announced already a deadline of phasing out third-party cookies. I understand third-party cookies are the connectors to the entire ad tech ecosystem. So things are in a flux over there. Apple has introduced some game changers. They've introduced something called a app tracking transparency framework that gives users who are using an Apple device a choice of whether their Apple ID should be trackable or not. They've come up with this concept of privacy nutrition labels. That means that once that deadline is crossed, if you're putting up an app in your app store, you have to have a nutrition label which says all the data that you're collecting and what are you doing with it. Okay. Android also, there are game changers coming. There's a concept of a privacy sandbox, etc., that Google is talking about. Regulators are getting very active. For example, the UK, Australia regulators cracking down actively on the ad tech tracking mechanisms. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of late about how there was this huge standoff in Australia between the regulator and saying that we'll not allow news to be published unless you do a revenue share, and Facebook threatening to walk out and stuff like that, right? Then you have courts, consumers, and civil society, where game-changing judgments are being passed. For example, if some of you have heard of the Schrems 2, which is basically there's a schema to move personal data from Europe to the US under something called Privacy Shield, and a gentleman called Schrems went and complained against it, and overnight it was yanked, saying it's illegal. Now imagine the amount of data that flows from EU to the US. And overnight, if you have said the mechanism you're using it for is invalid, and then people are scrambling. Okay, and you can see more and more such instances happening. There's a very active civil society across the globe which is pushing and driving regulators to investigate and take actions. There's a heightened awareness amongst consumers. I mean, for example, the COVID contact tracing apps. Who thought that there will be so much of debate and discussion about it? But there's an active consumer out there. Then, of course, you have incidents and attacks that are just relentless. I don't need to talk about it. There is reputation risk. A lot of incidents, for example, a lot of the large organizations that call us today, they are not waiting for the India bill to come. They're saying, forget the law. There's reputation risk at stake for us over here. Okay. And then there's also geopolitical forces over data. Data localization, data sovereignty, all of this that you're looking at is basically using data as a tool for, trade and so on and so forth. Okay. So, things about what happens with encryption, unprecedented overnight actions by governments. Like, what was this about the Indian government banning Chinese apps overnight, right? It's an example of, playing out at the geopolitical level. Now, the reason why I wanted to bring this out and discuss is because think about how your business can get affected by all these forces. Because all of this translates into what you do at the tech level, and therefore translates into what you implement in your organization. Okay. So as I said, why should startups bother at all about privacy, right? So one is, and we work with a lot of startups and with some of those, the unicorns that are very popular of late, they're all our customers. Okay, why? Because we, one is entry into specific markets may not be possible without complying with the specific country's privacy law. So we have some of our customers in the healthcare space, for example, even before they apply to enter the US market, when they apply for an FDA clearance, parts of that FDA clearance requires them to have implemented basic security and privacy measures. So they've not, if they're hardly, we have a client who's a 40-member company, but they're still, doing this because they have no choice. Okay. If you're in B2B, your clients may not agree to do business with you unless you've implemented strict measures. We are seeing situations where some of our clients come to us with an emergency saying, Abhi karwa do. Kyun? Because they would have worked for the last 8 months, working on a deal which has come to absolute fruition. Everything is signed off. It goes to the CISO. He puts a block saying, you please comply with all of this. And that compliance doesn't happen overnight. It takes another 3 to 4 months. Okay. Many scenarios like this we have seen over the last 3-4 years. If you work in a regulated sector where you have regulators, then the regulators also will demand that to stay in business you have to implement certain basic measures. And end of the day, no matter which of the above is applicable, remember you are an integral part of a overall digital supply chain. Okay, so therefore to continue functioning and continuing to grow without sort of roadblocks, this is one thing which you absolutely have to take care of. It is not a cost center which is something which is like a checkbox. It used to be like this a few years ago. Now things have changed a lot. Okay, implementing privacy, so we'll cover that.
Shivangi, we have a
Yeah.
question here
Sure.
from Rohit.
Yeah.
So he want to understand what kind of activities which affect the privacy of communities and companies, and can we do profiling of companies?
Yes, of course. If you're an organization, you can easily do profiling of companies. Yeah, you're asking if you're a individual, how do you figure out which company is doing what? No, there's no way you can figure out. You have to individually try and go. Like for example, in your apps, go and look at an app and what kind of permissions the app takes, for example. But otherwise, no, there's no ready database which is available, which is saying, like some activists who are saying that, okay, don't work with this company, don't do this. We don't have, unfortunately. I don't know if that was your question and I answered it all.
Thanks.
Okay. So let's do a quick view of what it takes to implement privacy in an organization and why it's a big challenge. So if only life was so simple, right, that you had privacy law and you came up with an implementation checklist and you voila, we're done kind of thing. You need structured frameworks, and there are frameworks available. So you have to use a methodology, you have to use standards, frameworks to implement so that you don't leave out stuff, because it's not a tech problem. You have to solve at a data level, at a process level, at a people level, as well as at a tech level. Okay. I say very simply, follow the personal data. So like in finance, you say follow the money. Similarly in privacy, just follow the personal data. Keep all the noise out. So, we sort of understand, once you understand what data you have and you're dealing with, and it's surprising how many organizations actually don't have an idea. Overlay this on whichever is the law and standard that you're exposed to. Usually it is multiple laws as well. And then you have a clear view of gaps. Okay. Also be cognizant of the fact that personal data reaches an organization in many ways. Okay, intuitively people just look at the collection points. Okay, but that is what the user provides knowingly, like you fill up a form. But there's a lot of data that you collect which is observed data, which gets recorded automatically. Cookies, sensors, CCTV cameras, for example. A host of personal data gets generated internally, which means transactions and operations generate, like logs, bank statements, so on and so forth, whatever usage statements that you have. Then you have data that is derived or inferred, okay, which is produced or derived as a result of analytics, big data. For example, today a risk score that is being sort of generated about whether somebody is creditworthy or not is often derived as a result of analytics, which a lot of you guys from the fintech world know is, from data points which have nothing to do with finance, right? Which is procured from outside. And then you have data that comes from third parties, lots and lots of data, right from something like a CIBIL score to a database of, which a database marketing agency comes and sells to you of prospects. All of that data is coming to you from everywhere. The user typically knows only about the first. Most users don't even know that there are other sources that from where an organization gets data. And we have found in our experience that close to 80% of personal data in an organization comes from the last four buckets, so to say. Okay. Other major challenges, the challenge of what we call data minimization and collection limitation. Okay. So I focused on marketing when I was graduating, and all of us from the business world are geared to think around saying that let me collect as much data as I can, because as we say, pata nahi kab use hoga, and it's not done with any malicious intent, right? Now has come a era where we have to really think about, what data we're collecting, why are we collecting it, and how can we limit it. So it's a complete mindset flip, where we're moving from collect as much as you can to, collect only the minimum possible. Okay. So that requires, it's a culture chain and takes a long time for an organization to wrap its head around it. If you're starting, it's great because, you don't have to fight existing culture. The other is what is called purpose and usage problem. Till date, nobody has ever asked you in an organization to think about what are you using the data for. As long as it's legitimately available for you, you've been free to use it as you wanted it, right? Now has come an era which is saying that, boss, you use it only for the purpose which the user has allowed you to use it for, and do not use it for something else without taking permission. So again, a complete change of mindset as well as organizational processes. And believe me, this purpose is, as I said, the pivot around which everything lies. Okay. A word on privacy breaches. So typically when you say breaches, you only think of what we call security breaches. Data leak ho gaya, or this data has been stolen, you've been attacked, whatever. But when you say privacy breaches, they are not just that. There are others as well. You use data for a purpose which you're not allowed to is a major breach. You transfer data across boundaries of geographical boundaries without the necessary instruments being used, breach. I mean, we've seen where the organization thinks it's everything in-house within India, but their vendor is storing stuff on a cloud which is outside India. There's still a violation, still liabilities are carried. Okay. You deny a right to any user coming to you and invoking one of those rights, or you don't comply with an organization measure, all of which is a breach, and there are penalties and liabilities associated. So when you're monitoring breaches, you need to monitor for all of this. Okay. Some key learnings over the years for us: the unknown unknowns in this whole domain are huge. Okay. So when it's like peeling an onion. You start, you think you know what is to be done, then you peel it, and then you have one of those, oh my God, there's one whole layer beneath it and beneath it and beneath it, right? So it takes a long time to implement. You need to run two separate programs, and there's an overlap in terms of security we saw. We're talking about a fairly long time to implement, okay? Even some of our clients who are companies, 100, 200 people companies, still take 6 months to implement a program, because it's not a tech problem. It's not something which you can just solve at the back end. Almost everybody in your organization who touches personal data in some way or the other needs to follow certain norms and processes, okay? And there's very dispersed stakeholders. It's not just the IT head or the CISO or the CIO or the legal. You have legal involved, you have risk and compliance, you have every business stakeholder involved in this. Yeah. So that brings me to the end of this. I hope I stuck to the 1 hour time frame. I'm happy to take questions.
Yeah. Thanks, Shivangi, for taking us through the whole session and making us aware about the difference between privacy, security, how over the years we are seeing a change in increase in information being collected over a period of time, and how is it different in India how the difference is more stark in India, the different facets of privacy, the information collection, and then keeping it secure for firms, like how much important it is for all the participants in the ecosystem, right? And apart from that, also, which are the key drivers which are driving this change? Most importantly, the regulations, PDPB laws, and regulators, and even the role of ecosystem has become very crucial. It will be even more important for India going forward. So thanks for taking us through, and it has been a really good session. Like, I really enjoyed it. And
Thank
a lot of people have, there are a lot of questions we have been receiving throughout the session. So I will just take through some of the sessions and some of the questions, and then maybe we can answer that.
Sure.
People can keep dropping the questions. So I'll start with the first question. Uh, so yeah.
Can I read it out? I've also
Yeah.
seen that
So
from Rohit, right? Non-personal data, what kind of activities affect the privacy of communities? Can we do profiling of companies? Any examples? So should I go one by one?
yeah. I'll
Yeah.
take.
Okay. So see, I mean, you can have non-personal data of every type. It can be a community. It can be within organizations. Data that is as a result of analytics or stuff like that. We can't today. There is no data available to profile companies who are dealing with it. Okay. So we'll have to go and figure out. Most people don't even know what personal data they carry. I mean, forget what non-personal data they carry. There's still ambiguity about the definition itself. Okay. Ajit is saying we are going to launch a global app soon. What measures do we need to take before the launch? Data privacy actions and data security actions are different. Yes, they are. How much will it cost to implement in our app? We will have to look at how much of personal data is there in your app, which countries you're looking at. I would advise you to look at what is going to be your primary focus geography, build for that geography, and then add the deltas for others. Okay, so if you have exposure to Europe, first do compliance with the EU GDPR. It sort of sets a standard, and then you can do the other measures. Happy to talk with you offline and help you. There's no one single answer. There are apps which don't have too much of data, so that it doesn't cost them much. And it's not just your app, right? The entire ecosystem at the back end. And then yes, you have to look at the security of that data separately from privacy of the data. There are different laws, and then you have sectoral laws. So for example, if you're in healthcare and you're looking at Europe, then you have the GDPR for privacy, you have something called the MSDF for security, plus you have some other stuff. Okay, so it depends on the geography.
So
As
Ranjit has a question. Yeah, as a SaaS-based entity, is it okay that we use data of our clients rather than the personal data, like community data or data which is generated apart from the personal data? So
I would advise you to get them to sign off, be transparent about it, state it in your contracts, and tell them what you're using the data for. Do not use it without getting a sign off from your users. Okay, be open and transparent.
Sanjay has a question regarding, so we are a social media platform, a video format, and we need contact, camera, audio, folder access. How should we convince users further for registration, phone number and email ID, and how to assure users of data privacy?
Good question. So, privacy laws do not say that you don't take permission and do not collect this data. Justify it that you really need it. Explain to the user, respect the user's intelligence, and tell them what are you collecting that data for. What are you going to use? Let's say you take access to camera and contacts and stuff like that. You say where it's going to be used and put it out in your notice very clearly in a simple language which is not hidden in legalese. Do not be ambiguous. Say very clearly, this is the data we collect, this is the purpose for which we collect it for, this is what we're going to use it for, and that's what we'll stick by. You look at some of the social media and other e-commerce platforms outside of India, they do a very good job of explaining this. Okay. In terms and contracts, you have informed, no, you have to put it up on a privacy notice, which is also known as a privacy policy that you put up on your website as well as you reference from your mobile app, you have to be very clear and upfront in that. Okay.
There's a question from Ashok that are there any trusted free tools which we can use to scan our environments?
Scan your personal device environment or
Yeah.
scan the your organizational environment?
Yeah. So it's not very clear. I think it's general. I think just about usage. So I think we can cover both.
Yeah, so there are tools come and go. Free tools, so there is like, literally every week you will have some free tool being launched. So you have to figure out for what you're looking for that free tool. For scanning your devices, you do have some. Then for scanning your environment, your organizational environment, you will need multiple. Some which will scan your website, some which will scan your app, somebody which will do an overall kind of assessment and. For some, there are no tools. You need to do it using Q&As and put it together.
One more question from Sumit here. So, what are the implications of the data privacy laws on data that has been collected with the consent of the consumer? Like, for example, market research data. So, implications of the laws on data that has been collected.
Good question. So, essentially, you're asking what do you do about legacy data, right? So the view is like this, and this is I've heard from this is what I've understood from the legal folks, is that the day the law goes live, whatever data you're sitting on comes under the purview of the law. As in, whatever personal data you're sitting on comes under the purview of the law. Make sure that that data, therefore, has been either consented to. Consent is just one way of getting a user to give your okay. You can do it via contracts, you can do it, there are different lawful bases. Make sure that there is some lawful basis attached to whatever data that you're sitting on, and if that is not the case, and if there's a discrepancy between the purpose that you're using the data for and what the user has sort of signed off on, then you have to go back and get a fresh update the contract or consent or whatever is the mechanism that is being deployed at the time.
Priyank has a question here. If we ask the user to upload his PII and store on cloud, but the user uploads US or EU ID, would we give liability as per the US or GDPR norms?
See, whether it's the US ID, whether it's the EU ID, doesn't matter. It's personal data, right? And if you are uploading, if the user is uploading it in India, then you come under the purview of the India law. But if, for example, the user is in the EU and your server is in India and the user is uploading that data, then you first get a consent from the user that is okay for transferring the data to a server in India. Under the GDPR, you need that. And then whatever is applicable for personal data, doesn't matter which geography it belongs to, you have to do what it takes. So there's personal data, then there are subcategories under it called sensitive personal data, health data, so on. So different laws have different requirements for different types of data, and you have to follow them.
Just a follow-on question from Priyank only. If we add the usage terms in website regarding terms and condition, would that be sufficient instead of adding it in the agreement?
See, I'll tell you. So this is going into the next level of a privacy clause, where there's something called a legal basis on which you process data. Okay. So at the first time that you're collecting data, you have to collect it using some sort of a legal basis or lawful basis, as it's called. That can be consent, it can be a contract, it can be some other things. Okay, let's just stick to consent and contract. So if you have initially collected the data basis a consent, then if you have changed anything, you need to go back and get consent again. If your initial thing is via a contract, let's say when I open a bank account, I'm actually signing a contract, right? Or when I join a company for my employee data, I'm signing an employment contract. So if something changes, then the basic instrument you've used as a contract, go back and modify that instrument, or do an add-on to it. Like I know many of my clients, for their employee data, they have gone and done an addendum to the employee contract. Okay, or consent, they just go back and get consent again. It is logistically a nightmare. You guys are a startup. I would urge you to do it right the first time. You will save ton of money and hassles at a later date.
Ajit has a question here on the cost. So it's also a very generic question that what is the cost to employ services like this, especially for a small scale social media
See,
startup.
we let you use our platform. You can use it with things. If you do a lot of it on your own, then it's very less. If you want us, so we have a range of services. Okay, so we do just help you get onboarded, so to say. One-time compliance. Then anything between 2 to a couple of lakhs. Maybe if you do more of it yourself and less of us, then we charge you less. But bulk of our clients actually are what we call virtual CISO and virtual DPO services, because it's not a one-time thing, right? So typically we sign multi-year contracts and we act like they're virtual CISOs and DPOs. In which case it can cost you anything between, some of our very small clients, anything between, I would say, I'm just throwing names out there because numbers out there, because if you have, if you may be a startup, but if you have just exposure to one law, then your compliance requirements are very low compared to somebody who has exposure to 15 laws. Just last week we started work with a relative startup which has exposure to 15 laws to begin with. So then there's a lot of work that is required to be done. So depending on that, anything I would say between 2.5 3 lakhs upwards, okay, for a virtual CISO, where we then do a host of other things as well. I could be way off the mark, so only when we know a little bit about your setup will we be able to tell you.
Uh, there's again a question on that. We are a social media startup. Kindly guide the compliances, how to fulfill those social media for a social media startup. Again, a very generic question.
So it depends, yeah, what really you're doing on with your social media. Um, there are a lot of small things that you need to do. It's not just one thing, right? So you need to go fix your notice, then you need to go fix saying where are you giving a choice, are you giving a choice, not giving a choice, how do you want to do it, how do you set up processes to get, let's say, a rights request from the user, what do you do at the back end, what kind of records you keep, all of that. So you need to do quite a bit. So I can't give you a one-off answer. It's more a set of action items that need to be done. Sorry for being vague about it, but look at the number of principles you need to kind of tick off, no, against. So you have to do something for each of them. The good news is it's not rocket science at all. I mean, you're all entrepreneurs, you're very smart guys. It's not rocket science. It's something which you just need to do. It's just like you do accounting, right? You have to file your GST and you have to file your returns. You're doing it using Zoho or whatever and managing well. So you'll figure this out as well. It's not something which you should just be aware, and as I said, take action early, because otherwise you have to bolt it on later, especially if you're building a tech product, like a website or an app or something. Then to bolt it on later will be far more costlier. You might as well build it into the design. Maybe there'll be a delta extra cost, but you might as well do it now. Otherwise later on you'll have to undo many things, which is not worth it. Okay.
Yeah. So I think we have come to the end of the question and the answer round also.
Great.
I think most of the questions were answered in a very lucid and very clear by Shivangi. So any more questions, guys, you can reach out. Otherwise, I think we are done. Shivangi, if you want to cover anything else from this.
Nothing. I think we have a discounted offer for the winners. So to provide our virtual CISO and DPO services as well. But feel free to reach out. You can drop me a mail at privacy@arka.com. ARRKA. Happy to answer any other questions that you may have at any time. Okay.
One last question, I think, from Kotesh now. Do we need a separate cookie and a privacy policy? A separate cookie and a privacy policy.
Yeah, so there is if you're addressing the EU market, you need that cookie consent policy separately, which is different from the privacy policy that is on your website. Yeah.
Okay.
I've just put my mail ID that anybody wants to mail me on. Yeah.
Thanks, Shivangi, for such a nice and informative session, and thanks everyone for being such a lively audience. A lot of questions which were there, like across the board, and a lot of it were answered very clearly, so very informatively by Shivangi. So thanks everyone for joining the session, and thanks Shivangi for like being such a nice mentor and such a nice providing us so much visibility and so much insights about data privacy, data security, right?
My,
Information.
my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me, and wish you all the best. All of your entrepreneurs starting your journey. I'm still in that journey. I've been in your shoes. It's hard, but
11
it's
years
great
now. Yeah.
fun. Yeah, it's great fun. Persist and enjoy yourself. Okay. Bye. Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone.